You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Andrew Yan.
Authors. I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web. Beware the Chinaman by Stephen Taylor. The future is electric, but who holds the power? Sent by government agent Howard to pick up a stolen hard drive, Danny soon finds himself fighting for his life as he's chased across Europe by the mysterious and deadly Chinaman. The hard drive holds information to expose an organization called the Board, and its chairman wants it back. The Board's plan is to save the planet and gain global dominance through its ecological empire. The execution of the plan is by any means necessary. Beware the Chinaman, the new thriller by Stephen Taylor. Unleashing Iron, Book 3 of the Unwilling Souls series by Gregory D. Little, arrives April 24th and is available for pre-order now. Seslukani has one mission: keep humankind's murderous gods imprisoned. She's about to fail. The gods have achieved the unthinkable, inhabiting human avatars from within their prison's walls. They now gather followers and work to break it open from the outside. One of those avatars is Sessa's own father. Just as all seems lost, Sess learns of a recently unearthed artifact so powerful that it can repair the prison and save her father from the possession that is killing him. But in the wrong hands, the artifact could demolish the prison instead of repairing it, and it's already been stolen. In a desperate race to control the object that will save or end the world, Sess faces a devastating choice as she realizes that no one is immune to the artifact's ancient promise of forgotten power. Not her family, not her friends, not even herself. Unleashing Iron is available for pre-order now. Order before April 24th to get the special sale price. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am super excited to have Roshani Chokshi on the show with me. Today, she has a phenomenal new book. It's in the Riordan Presents series. It's Aru Shah and the Tree of Wishes, and it's the third book in the Pandava series. I super love this book. It's so much fun. Welcome to the show, Roshani.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Roshani, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh, wow. I think I was always writing stories and things for my family, but the moment where magic became magic writing became a very magical option to me, excuse me, was after I read Harry Potter and I was fully expecting to receive my owl and my letter in the mail. And I did not, and that was sad. And so I was like, I suppose if I cannot be a witch, I might as well be a word sorceress. So that was that.
It's so funny that you said magic instead of writing, because some days it feels like we got led into some secret club or something, and you get to make whole worlds out of nothing. It's a pretty cool feeling.
Absolutely.
So, Roshani, were you a bookish kid? Did you read a lot as a kid?
Oh my gosh, I read so much as a kid. Probably things I shouldn't have read. I think for the longest time, my parents were under the impression that Flowers in the Attic was a botany book, but it's not. And so that was traumatizing. So moments like that.
Oh, that's so funny. That is so funny. Do you remember, because this book is fantasy and most of the books that you've written, or all of them, are magical fantasy type books. Do you remember the first fantasy book or series or author that you read that just completely opened your mind to the possibilities of fantastical fiction?
Oh, absolutely. It was a book called Tithe by Holly Black, who has remained one of my favorite authors of all time and who I'm very, very delighted to say has become a friend over the years, which is just, I think 11-year-old me would be just completely shocked. Thinking, you have her number in your phone? Are you serious? Something like that. So that's been really delightful. But Tithe is a modern fairy tale story, and it's gritty and delightful, and it portrays fairies not as this cherub, rosy-cheeked, friendly, good people that are, out to leave you gold coins if you leave them a bowl of milk on the doorstep. They're vicious, they're beautiful and devastating, and you can't help but to want to be them, want to be part of this immortal world where, because they can't die, life takes on very different meaning. They're cruel just to feel something and be entertained. And I was just so taken aback and swept up in how she crafted an Otherworld. And it's something that has stuck with me for years.
Roshani, you were in law school when you sold your first book, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
What was the draw that led you to law school?
Well, I am the daughter of immigrants, first generation American. My family has worked extraordinarily hard to get here and to do well here. And so something you don't want to tell your family after they've crossed oceans to give you a better life is that you are going to be a medievalist major and you would just like to write about dragons indefinitely. Thanks for immigrating. So I didn't. Although I was a medievalist, I did have to have a sort of practical backup. And so that's what led me to law school. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed law school. I only did a year of it, but I loved it. I thought it was the study of storytelling and narrative. And if anything, it just made me, I think, a better storyteller.
Well, it sounds like when you were in law school, you were still you were pursuing writing. What was that book that you wrote that got sold during that time?
So it was my debut novel called The Star-Touched Queen, and that is a Beauty and the Beast retelling with Hindu mythology. And I was just extremely shocked when it sold. To be honest, its very first offer was an ebook only deal. And I was still thrilled. I was like, wow, it's really happening. And then publishing is a strange beast. When something gets sold, it's like chum that's thrown in the water to sharks. And all of a sudden, we essentially went into a tiny bidding war over the book. And I was able to defer law school and to move back home and to eventually move elsewhere, all because of that book, which later on became my first New York Times bestseller and which truly launched my whole career.
It's amazing like you said, the chum in the water, the things that come along, one experience leads to another, and it's like if you knew all of the possibilities from the beginning, it's hard to say if we would do things, if we would know how to steer our careers in the right direction, because things are so seem to be such happenstance sometimes. It's crazy to try to make that happen.
Yeah, it's just bizarre.
Yeah. So your love of fantasy, you said the first book was a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but with Hindu mythology. You said you're the daughter of immigrants. Where are your parents from?
So my dad is from India, and my mother is from the Philippines.
Gotcha. So that's where the Hindu influence comes from.
Yeah.
Was that something that was prevalent in your home growing up? The telling of stories from your parents' homeland, like the Hindu mythology. How familiar were you with that when you started writing the book?
Very familiar. I would say far more familiar with the Indian side of my heritage in a way than my Filipino side, which came a lot later. I mean, our mom is absolutely amazing and a fantastic storyteller in her own right. But just in terms of exposure to culture, we were a lot more exposed to our Indian side. And it's something that I've thought about a lot, particularly as I think about new stories to tell. My mom is really pretty anxious to get her Filipino story in. And I'm doing my best. But it's raised a lot of questions for me in terms of how both of those countries had widely different experiences being colonized. For example, when the British ruled India for however long, they allowed them to keep their language, their religion. They didn't burn down their temples. They transcribed a lot of their ancient texts. And of course, yes, they took many things from India and brought it back to their museums. But in that way, at least, the culture was preserved. And what you see in the Philippines when it was ruled over by Spain for almost 400 years is something that's been wiped away. Almost every Filipino I know has a Spanish last name. They are a largely Catholic country. Those mythologies and those stories they told, which had a really strong oral storytelling tradition, are not as richly retold. In fact, the thing that remains the strongest, at least from my understanding of the Philippines, are our ghost stories and our tales of monsters. And I think that that's actually really sad. So that's the reason why when it comes to writing mythological based stories, I go more towards the Indian side, if anything, just because there's an abundance of it. And my worry with writing too much Filipino mythology is that someone may take my reinterpretation as fact.
Mm. Yeah, that's wow, that's something I've not thought about. That wow, yeah. I'm just thinking of a family of Filipino friends that we have, and talking with them, it seems like that Spanish culture just almost just laid over on top of it, like it just got bulldozed and repaved like a new road, or something, and that's so sad. It makes me sad.
It makes me sad too, but it's just different. I mean, Britain was there for 200 years. Spain got double the time. Who knows what would have happened had it been for years, Well, who knows?
Well, but those the Indian folklore mythology is so well preserved, and those are some of the best stories. Do you remember, when you were writing that first book, the Star-Touched Queen, how did you bring the mythology into something that we think of as, a very European story?
Well, one of the beautiful things about particularly Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast is that I'm pretty sure you could spin a globe and every country has their own version of that story. There's something very universal, particularly about those two tales, that makes me think that, just as a collective species, we crave stories that show us that monstrous beauty, that something monstrous can become beautiful, and also particularly in the case of Cinderella, I mean, she's considered a bit of a doormat in terms of a Disney princess. She's not shooting off arrows. She's not sailing the sea like Moana. But I think her strength is a lot quieter in the sense that this is someone whose family was supposed to love and protect her and instead treated her terribly. And her true superpower at the end of it is to emerge from a situation of actual abuse and still have the power to give her heart to someone. That is power.
Right. What did you follow that first book up with? And the way you described the way your career just took off and went in all of these unexpected directions. When you have a book like that garners so much attention and, that a lot of eyes are on you, how do you follow such a debut like that up?
Well, with a lot of tears and frustration, I'll tell you that it was the greatest blessing, and but ended up in a bit of a way a mixed blessing to get that sort of attention from the beginning. Mostly because I had to learn how to tune out both my biggest fans and my loudest critics, and be able to tell a story that I wanted to read for myself, and that is so often the advice that I give to aspiring writers. Write what you want to read. And, we have the saying, write what you know, but, massage that a bit. Write what you know to be true. And that's what makes it honest to yourself.
And that second book became A Crown of Wishes. Is that right?
Yes.
And what was the story of that book?
So A Crown of Wishes is a companion story to The Star-Touched Queen. So the Star-Touched Queen followed a character named Maya, and A Crown of Wishes is about her little sister Gauri and the adventure that she goes on. And in it, she is paired with an enemy prince from a neighboring kingdom, and they have to fight in a magical tournament to win a wish. And it was really fun to write, particularly because I hadn't, how do I describe it? The prince and princess were really funny to me. They were very much based off of the sort of bantering, bickering relationship of Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler. And Gauri was a fun character to write because she's a princess, but she's a warrior princess. And Vikram was an interesting male lead to write because he's not a brooding hero sort. He's sort of like the sort of lanky jokester who may not have a ton of muscle but can run really fast. That kind of guy.
When that book came out, how was it received as a follow up? The second book for a lot of people is a real struggle. Do you feel like that your voice got stronger with that second book? What was that second book experience like for you?
I mean, it did not get nearly as much attention. It didn't perform nearly as well as The Star-Touched Queen, but it was the book that taught me that I could do this, that I wasn't some sort of one-hit wonder or whatever, but that I was here to stay, and that I could work with a contract and that I could meet a deadline. And even if nobody seemed to read the book or like it, at the end of the day, I was acknowledging that I think for so many creators, we are building empires in the dark. And we don't always get to see the light shine on the thing that we're creating, but we just keep at it. True writing, I really think, is a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful way to look at it. And you never know when that backlist is going to, grab attention and whatever. That's the great thing about writing is that books are not, they're not time sensitive in a lot of ways. You just never know.
Yeah.
You talked about Harry Potter earlier, and not long after Harry Potter, came to global dominance, we met another young protagonist in Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson books, and Rick Riordan really blazed this new trail of reimagining mythological stories and heroes and making those age-old stories accessible to young people again, and made young people care about these old dusty stories. And You just did amazing things, and went on to have several popular series. But Rick Riordan now does this thing, Rick Riordan Presents, where he highlights other authors and maybe people that are more well adept at telling different kinds of stories than he might be. How did you get connected with Rick, and how did that relationship form?
So I first heard about the Rick Riordan Presents series back in 2016. And I just thought it was such a cool idea for an imprint. And I was so excited to hear that he was looking for, that he was looking for other voices from people with marginalized backgrounds who could do what he had done for Greek and Roman and Norse and Egyptian mythology, and do that for their own cultural myths and their own backgrounds and stuff. So after I got that news, I actually ran home and I emailed my agent, and I was like, I can't believe this is a real thing. Can you find out? I would love to work with him, and I'd love to do something. And we did discover that it was real. And so I wrote a 3-chapter sample, and we sent it off, with a hope and a prayer and an expectation that absolutely nothing would happen. And boy, were we wrong.
Where did the character of Aru Shah come from? And had you imagined this girl in that 3 chapters that you wrote up? Was she there from the beginning? Tell me about her.
Yeah, Aru is just so near and dear to my heart, just simply because I gave her so many of my own characteristics when I was her age and middle school. I was also a bit of a liar. I had a tendency to stretch the truth and imagination. And I gave all of that to her, which was really fun in the end, because she's someone who has a really big heart, is just trying to figure out her place in the world. And it's just been a joy to watch her grow up over the course of this series.
Was she there from the beginning? Did she come first? Did the idea for the story, like how did this world begin to build for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the story came first, just in terms of the framework, where when I heard about Rick Riordan Presents line, I was like, wow, I really, really want to write a story for this. I think my Sailor Moon and reimagining of the Pandava brothers would be super fun and really fit with them. And from there, that's how Aru's character came about. I was trying to think of what would a reincarnation of one of those demigod brothers look like. And kind of just to make her relatable to me, because I'd never written a middle grade story before, I just started off with, what would I do? And from there, Aru became a completely different person from myself, albeit with lots of personality crossover. And then she just sort of jumped onto the page and was ridiculous.
Hindu mythology is so rich with gods and goddesses and demigods. How did you pick a starting point to jump into this world for, to do what Rick had done with some other mythologies? Like you have to find a character or a particular story as a gateway, a place to bring people in to then start building your world or your interpretation of that world. How did you choose where to bring people in?
Well, it was interesting because I wanted to give people just enough about Aru's background and who she was as a character, what it is, how she felt a little bit lost and adrift, but was still just a fiercely funny voice. And I think a lot about Philip Pullman, who's one of my favorite authors. He wrote the His Dark Materials trilogy, starting with The Golden Compass. And when he talks about writing, he describes it as a process of where to put the camera. And that's how you start the story. Where does somebody want to be looking at a character? And so the story starts off with Aru opening the door because she has been caught in a lie by her classmates and is then forced to follow through on a promise, to distract them. She says, it's true that the lamp I have really is magical and holding a demon or something. And she doesn't think anything's going to happen. But of course, when she lights this lamp, that's when she unleashes the demon and also finds out that she is a demigod. And it was being able to place that story there where she's lazy, she's not doing anything, she's dressed in her Spider-Man pajamas, she is expecting absolutely nothing. That's where I wanted to put the camera. I wanted to show them what Aru was like before all of this happened and then have the story essentially start from page 2.
Was it, you said you had never written middle grade before. You have mostly written adult and YA. Was that a difficult transition for you to get in that mindset so that you are connecting with that age group?
Yeah, well, it was difficult in the sense that middle grade is, I think, much harder to edit from the beginning. Like, I had to write it slower because the one thing about middle grade that that is obvious, if you can't do this, don't write middle grade. And that is voice. If you sound like the meme of Steve Buscemi, like holding a skateboard and saying, "What's up, fellow kids?" I mean, you're screwed. You can't write this. And that's okay. There's plenty of brilliant authors who can't write this. And I think the only reason I was capable of doing that is because I still have so many demons from middle school that I'm currently exorcising. And for whatever reason, all that middle school trauma decided to help me in this one extremely specific thing, which is dig completely into and lean into who I was when I was in 7th grade. So shout out to trauma.
Oh man, Roshani, when we're looking at stories like this, where we're interpreting legends and myths in a new fantasy world, we live in a society where everything has to be put, through the scientific method. We want to prove everything, and which is wonderful. But that, I'm looking for the words to say what I'm trying to say. We use fantasy literature as a way to get out of this world and to think of possibilities that are not possible. When you're dealing with mythologies, we don't really have modern mythologies like the ones that you're exploring here. What is the importance of mythology in a society like we live in today? And do you think that fantasy literature is our new way of creating mythologies that help us to deal, to make sense of things in the real world? Does that make sense at all?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that's the original purpose of mythology, right? The whole thing was to explain the world around you, to explain natural phenomena that you didn't have the words or the science or whatever to articulate. And so I think now more than ever, fairy tale retellings and mythology are sought after by kids because we are all always actively trying to navigate a new and unfamiliar world and a new and unfamiliar situation. And there's something so heartwarming about watching somebody else go on these adventures that makes us feel, I think, far less alone.
Right. When you're creating, well, first off, tell us about Pandava, the Pandava Sisters. What is, who are they, and what is their importance?
So they are based off of the legendary demigod brothers called the Pandava brothers from the Indian Sanskrit epic, the Mahabharata. And Aru and her sisters are all reincarnations of those original Pandava brothers. And so for me, like, getting to write about their personalities was really fun because it was all about trying to imagine what these characters would be like in modern times, and also sort of stripping away the other aspects of them, boiling them down to a couple personality traits, and then giving those to 12-year-old girls and seeing what would happen.
I love it. How much input have you or interaction have you had with Rick during this process? And is he hands on? What's it like working with him?
It's a joy. He is so generous and fabulous with his time and his critique. He's just been such an enormous cheerleader of the entire Rick Riordan Presents imprint and of all the different authors within it. So he really is a joy to work with.
That's awesome. You love to hear that people are as amazing in real life as you hope that they'll be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He is a delight.
Yeah. The new book, Aru Shah and the Tree of Wishes, is book 3 in the Pandava series. How many books do you foresee will be in the series?
It'll be about 5. And then I think Aru's adventures will be done for now. And who knows? I'll never shut the door on her, and I know she'll annoy me for the rest of my life, and I love her for that. But I think I'm getting close to saying all that I have to say about Aru and her journeys.
Well, we look forward to seeing how you land the series, because each book in the series definitely leaves you needing to know what happens next.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. How are you planning? Did you know that this would be about 5 books from the beginning, and did you have a kind of a meta plan, or is it unfolding as you write it?
Well, I think I always knew how the story was going to end. And for me, it's a process of just reverse engineering that, the point at which thinking about how the characters are going to end things and how they'll end up there, just so it's really a discovery process of getting to know the characters and figuring out how they grow into the person that I've imagined them becoming by the end of the story.
Incredible. Roshani, this has been so much fun talking. The new book, Aru Shah and the Tree of Wishes, is available everywhere now. There's links to it in the show notes of this episode. If people are just discovering you and want to connect with all the great stuff that you do, is there a place where they can find you online?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the best place to find me is on Instagram. You can just type in my first and last name, which is spelled ROSHANICHOKSHI, and you'll find me there.
Excellent. Thank you, Roshani, for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. We're going to send everyone to see you.
Okay. Awesome.
Before We Ever Spoke by Dan Largent. Cleveland, Ohio, 2006. After a chance encounter, 3 people soon find out that life can sometimes thrust us into the public eye, even when taking great measures to avoid it. Cooper Madison was the best pitcher in baseball after being drafted number 1 overall in 1996 from the small Gulf Coast town of Pass Christian, Mississippi. 1 year after announcing his sudden and shocking retirement, he finds himself seeking anonymity in Cleveland, Ohio. Kara Knox is the youngest sibling to 3 older brothers. After a tragic work accident to her closest relative, she has built up a tough exterior as she begins her final year of college at Cleveland State University. Jason Knox, Kara's oldest brother, is the lead detective on Cleveland's Edgewater Park killer case. After months without a suspect, he's feeling the heat from his media-hungry chief. Serendipity intervenes, and all 3 learn that perception and reality are paths that rarely ever intersect. Before We Ever Spoke by Dan Largent. Hey folks, you really ought to check out Patricia Gillam's Heroes of Corvus series. Book 1 is called A Superhero's Duty. A fight between a second-generation superhero named Red Bolt and a villain for hire named Icarus goes terribly wrong, resulting in the drowning deaths of 3 innocent civilians and orphaning a 6-year-old boy. Racked with guilt, Red Bolt visits Cameron Wilson at the hospital every night and won't leave the boy's side until he falls asleep. Befriended by a night shift nurse, the man in costume begins to disclose what really happened after the fight and why he feels the death of Cameron's parents and sister fall on his actions. A superhero didn't survive that night, and Cameron and the rest of the city are not out of danger. A Superhero's Duty, Book 1 of the Heroes of Corvus by Patricia Gillam. Get this series now.